This is the leaders and feeders in policy, all about getting entrepreneurs' priorities, entrepreneurs' voices into the policy-making process. This session is co-sponsored by the Center for International Private Enterprise, CIPE. I'm from CIPE, I'm Kim Betcher, your moderator, and co-sponsored by Startup Nations of the DEN Network. In the last few years, we've seen kind of an explosion of interest in policy for entrepreneurship. I'm really delighted to see how many policy conversations happening here. And you would not have seen this 5 or 10 years ago. People were talking only about financing, capacity building for entrepreneurs, support services, and now policy has come to the fore. Startup Chile is well known. There's a Startup Act for Tunisia, a Startup Act for Argentina. We have the whole Startup Nations network. So there's a lot going on, really interesting policy conversations. The question is, where are the entrepreneurs in these conversations? Now there are cases where entrepreneurs are leaders in policy. I'm inspired by the example of 3 entrepreneurs in the United States, Woody Neese and his colleagues, who got the legislation for crowdfunding into the Jobs Act. 3 entrepreneurs got a policy change going. But more often than not, you don't see the entrepreneurs in policy. Now, the title for this session comes from Brad Feld's notion that entrepreneurs should be the leaders in ecosystem development, and everybody else who supports them is a feeder. And arguably, this is just as true in the policy space as in any other aspect of ecosystem development. So why should entrepreneurs be the leaders? It's partly because ecosystems are these organic developments. They're not easily created or built through top-down efforts, so entrepreneurs, they have skin in the game, they have the information. Entrepreneurship needs. Also, it's important to align efforts. I remember being at a policy roundtable in a certain country where the government officials were so proudly explaining how they were supporting the development of entrepreneurship and by investing in higher level education and R&D. All well-intentioned, and the entrepreneur said that's not our problem. The problem is the intellectual property law in this case. If you think about it, entrepreneurs put a lot of work into the product market fit. Why shouldn't policymakers be putting just as much effort into fitting their policies to the entrepreneur's needs? And finally, I would just say that if you want to be inclusive, and inclusivity is really a paramount challenge today, policy conversations, getting more voices involved is important. Before I introduce our terrific panel, I just want to acknowledge our sponsors. Again, this session is co-organized by Startup Nations and the Center for International Private Enterprise, CIPE. I'd like to thank Tamkeen for funding one of our speakers, and acknowledge the United States Department of State for funding CIPE's work in Bahrain. We have 2 entrepreneurs and a couple of policy and government representatives here today. We have, to my immediate left, Christian Sosa from Paraguay. He's the head of the Paraguay Entrepreneurs Association and social entrepreneur. Next we have Igor Nadzov from Macedonia, one of the founders of Startup Macedonia and South Central Ventures, working with the youth on tech startups across the Western Balkans. Then we have His Excellency, Mr. Darwish Al-Manai, who is a member of the Shura Council here in Bahrain. You maybe heard this morning about some of the legislative reforms. Mr. Manai will be telling you about that. And he also has extensive experience as a businessman. And then I'm delighted to have the United States government, Mr. David Blackham, who is Associate Administrator for International Trade for the Small Business Administration. So thank you, gentlemen, all of you. We're going to start with the first question about why it is that entrepreneurs need to be in the policy process, or at least why their priorities have to be reflected. Christian, can we start with you?
Thank you for the invitation as well. It's an honor to be here. Well, the first thing is that you need to know about Paraguay is that we have our 70% of our population is under 35. So that's key in the strategic planification of really being able to promote entrepreneurship as an engine for development. So the thing is also that the micro, small, and medium-sized businesses in Paraguay represent 93% of the total businesses, and we employ, like, I think 61% of the forced labor in Paraguay. So I think that we need to be taking account in this process of designing the legal framework. Okay, we have in Paraguay, talking about inclusivity, a huge gap between the big and traditional and conservative enterprises and the small businesses. Even though we are 93% of the businesses in Paraguay, we only contribute like 7% of the GDP. So we've been able to, we found the Paraguay Entrepreneur Association last year, in December 2017, and we've managed to affiliate 2,000 members across the country. That's an important number. We're in just a few months, one of the most important spaces where entrepreneurs can really put their voices. Sorry about the English. Okay, we've managed to support two important bills that are the timely payment bill that is more related to making more just future payment for the micro and small businesses. We're trying to lower the from 45 days or 60 days of payment to just 30 days, because that's a huge problem for us entrepreneurs. And also, we've been working with a simplified society bill that aims to make it easier to register your business and to open a company. It usually takes 60 days. I own a company there, and it took me 60 days to open my social enterprise, and now we are able to lower that to just 1 day. The thing is, this is not easy. Like, this funnel, one of the last funnels of the day, and I think it reflects what usually happens. We're always talking about entrepreneurs and the importance of entrepreneurs and the importance of the ecosystem, but we are not usually invited to really start designing the policies that help us to really improve our support of in the development of our countries. And these two bills that I'm talking about wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't organized, I think, 10 events with authorities, and we also designed like 3 activities with 100 entrepreneurs on board and with the elected authorities to let them know what we need, to let them know what these two policies were two of our main priorities when we founded this association, and they heard us, but they heard us because we were like 100 people talking to them. So the thing is that I think it's important that the government take in account our priorities, but we have to make that happen. Like, we are usually accustomed to make things happen with our enterprises. We should do the same with the public policy design process. We have to be responsible for creating and promoting these kind of spaces and conversations. We have to design intentional conversations so we're policy making design, and we have to be responsible for that and not just expect that they will do that because they won't. So I think that's why it's important to hear us, but we have to make us be heard.
That's great. Igor.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for being here. I'll try to keep it short because I can speak a lot about Macedonia. But just to give you a context, Macedonia is a country in Europe, 2.5 population, and we actually got our independence from Yugoslavia back in the 90s, where basically, as a country, we are very much known for agriculture and for construction and developing of products, but not necessarily building businesses. So we had a technology experience and how to actually create something, but we didn't know how to make it a brand out of it. So me being the first generation that was raised in an independent state where I had to find a way to form a company, always challenging by what is there to support you and what was there in Europe. So my idea at start was, okay, let me see what's happening in Europe, and then I can bring it here in my own environment and community. What I saw that the policies that were created by the government had nothing to do with what the entrepreneurs wanted. They were copy-pasted policies by something that somebody envisioned how it should look like, but not necessarily were resonating with the real situation. So that's why at the point when I was forming my first company more than 10 years ago, I faced this really challenge to find an investor, to find the support system, and then when I exited the company, I actually made that my mission to provide the support system for entrepreneurs in Macedonia, especially tech entrepreneurs. That is why more than 3 years ago I got part of a VC fund that's investing in technology. At the same time, opening an organization that is called Startup Macedonia, that structurally connects the whole ecosystem and ecosystem actors to drive the ecosystem to the right direction. When I say right direction, it means that you have to have a data-driven system and really measure what is happening in order to translate into policies. Because if you cannot measure and you cannot know what your companies want to achieve, you basically cannot achieve anything. So what we have started actually is that simple thing of connecting the companies together with the service providers and having and identifying the gaps. So when identifying the gaps, then we're suggesting a body that will create a policy and suggest it to the government. How that will go into practice, we're just 1 year doing that, and we must say that we have gone a long way. We have for the first time a fund of innovation that actually finances early stage startups to fund their businesses, and we basically are building the first digital ecosystem of this kind in the world. So I have to say that policy can be seen as not sexy. Policy can be seen as not something that people would like to do, but it's necessary because if nobody wants to deal with it, at the end the government will not construct something that is necessary for the business sector.
Thank you. Mr. Manai, I know that you had a process to bring some entrepreneur voices, some business voices into the policy making here, the reforms here in Bahrain. Why was there a need for that?
Thank you. Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, Kingdom of Bahrain is hosting the 11th edition of the Global Entrepreneurship Congress 2009, selected by the United Nations. This is by itself is a recognition for Bahrain. For its continuous effort for the sustainable economic development through integration and investment, and in line with our economic vision 2010. Here, I'm also privileged to be one of the speakers to deliver the speech on the business Bahrain National Business Opportunity. Entrepreneurship is one of the most important input in the economic development of my country. Entrepreneur can change the way we live and work by increasing the GDP and decreasing the unemployment. Therefore, we are doing our best to make Bahrain an investment environment. Hence, Bahrain is in 2018 gained foreign investments worth of US dollar 840 million. The process should allow private sectors representatives to present the concerns of the business community to the government officials in a systematic and unified approach. Let me give you something on MBA summary. Collection of data from business owners for 6 business sectors. These sectors were industry, contracting, real estate, IT, transportation, and beauty salons. Those sectors represent the bulk of our national economy, excluding the natural resources revenue. Done in 3 stages over 2 years. Through professional members, researchers, provided specific recommendations for improvement, helped by the Center for International Private Enterprises, SIPE, as part of the Chamber of Commerce USA, and we do thank them for their assistance. To conclude, MBA is the right tool which can create an effective partnership between the government and private sector to encourage investments by stimulating business activities, leading to economic growth for the country. By the way, the MBA for Bahrain set up through a voluntary members of professionals members from different backgrounds become the voice of the private sector. I have the honor to be the chairman of the steering committee and to serve the nation at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was a really great example of a collective business advocacy program. Mr. Glaucom, what do you think about the need for entrepreneurs to be involved in policy making?
Yeah, thanks y'all for being here. Thanks for having me. The reason it's important, a couple reasons, but one is because we want folks that look like these guys to be weighing in the policy, not just people that look like me. So I've come to this, I currently work at the Small Business Administration, as I said, but previously I worked on the Hill. I worked in the United States Senate, I was on the Judiciary Committee, and the most well-intentioned people will try and do the most well-intentioned things and just happen to snuff out things that entrepreneurs need. Because if you have a bunch of lawyers like me writing all the bills and laws related to business development, entrepreneurship, by definition, no matter how much I want to help, I'm not going to know what y'all know. Y'all have gone through the process, you've done the things you do. So without those voices, I'm left to just try and do maybe a cut and paste, as mentioned earlier. Just do what has worked in other places, in other areas of the law, and that's not necessarily going to lead to the best outcome. And so I'll give you an example of how one size does not fit all. And so, and in a well-intentioned area. So, and medical devices. So medical devices in the United States, at least, is small business. They make a lot of money, but in general, they're small companies producing materials. The United States has a lot of laws that regulate pharmaceuticals and devices, but because there's such a huge variance, we have laws that are specific to different types of sectors, even within the medical device umbrella. But other countries, developing countries that are trying to improve their laws, will take the highest standards we apply, which is generally to drugs, right? To things you're going to take. And they'll slap that on their entire medical device industry. And the problem is, the laws that regulate medical clubs do not need to be as stringent as the laws that govern or the regulations that govern medicine that you're going to take. And so, even though it's well-intentioned and it's meant to protect the public, the end result is that you'll set back or limit the ability of the industry to grow because you're taking what is, in this case, the highest common denominator, but that's not good in regulation. So, regulation, like law, needs the voices of practitioners. It's a necessary element. The United States, similar to what y'all were mentioning earlier, there's lots of trade associations and other types of groups, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Small Business Industry, National Small Business Association, things like that will go to the Hill. They constantly engage with policymakers. They actively weigh in on legislation. As you mentioned in your opening, they will get specific parts of laws changed and have a very powerful voice. Without their engagement, again, even if you mean well, you can have a disastrous result. And for an entrepreneur or a small business, as I know in my current role, one bad outcome can end your career, right? It can end the thing you were trying to do. And especially as it relates to laws and regulations, once they're in place, they're not real easy to roll back. So, we try and be innovative. President Trump, soon into office, issued an executive order saying for any new regulation, you need to roll back too. And so those are types of things we take as agencies internally, as the Small Business Administration. We look at those regulations that are impacting industry, try and receive feedback through different working groups, both formal and informal. So we partner, we have advisory councils, which are made up of private sector individuals that feed into the policy making as part of the U.S. government official policy. But we also have informal groups, trade associations, and others that we partner with to give real feedback. So again, it's not even looking at what they're trying to accomplish. Y'all do not use your voice to weigh in with folks like us that are making the policy. It'll inevitably lead to an outcome that is not the best outcome, no matter how much I would like to see. So anyway, keep weighing in.
Thanks, David, especially for raising that point that policy may not be the first of your challenges as an entrepreneur, except when it's a life-ending one, especially in a highly regulated industry like medical devices. All right, I'm feeling good about how that went. So let's go through the same order again for another round of questions as we open it up. And now, how do we actually do this? I mean, we have a leadership and practitioner audience here. How do they go about doing this?
Well, the thing is, I think this type of conversations help to really do that. I mean, in Paraguay, for example, one of the representatives that is presenting the bill about the timely payment, he did this, with one conversation with entrepreneurs, but he also opened a Google Drive Docs link, a public link, and he just tweeted it, and we helped him to get to entrepreneurs to really suggest and commend this project about this bill. And he got I think maybe 500 suggestions and comments, and they were really, really useful to really change that law and to improve it. So I think it's easier than we think to really manage to listen to entrepreneurs and give them the space that they need to really focus on making or designing a bill that really helps them and has a real impact in what they're doing. And I think that us as entrepreneurs and also the representatives or the lawyers that are making the bills, we need to see that if we want to design real impact laws, we have to be open to listen to different points of view or different experiences. My experience as an entrepreneur is really useful for this representative, or was really useful for this representative. And his experience as a representative helped me a lot to understand how things work in the Congress. So I think being able to design, as I said earlier, design conversations and intentional conversations towards seeing things that we are not able to see from our place and from our experience. I think it helps to really get to the point that we can design laws that have a real impact and help improve, entrepreneurial ecosystem in our country. and we are living that in Paraguay now. It's one of the main priorities of the current government, and that's a huge milestone that we got after like 5 or 6 years working to strengthen this entrepreneurial ecosystem, and now this is possible. So we have to understand that this is a process as well. We have to gain strength and a voice to be heard, and after that we can, we have to design these spaces. So yeah, I think that's the way to do it, and that's our way.
As I said from the very start that nobody when starting a business wanted to go into policy making. Just policy making is the way that you can grow much faster and open doors for the one like yourself and the one that comes after you. So basically I will mention three stories, short stories on how getting numbers or getting together is impacting how decision making is done, at least in our country. One would be actually an initiative supported by SAI in Macedonia when it comes to youth engagement and how youth should have access to practical knowledge apart from the traditional education system in order to be qualified to open a business once they finish their formal education. So there was a lot of activity going on in the youth sector, but it ended up just being something written and approved with not real value, and when it puts into practice there are so many holes in the bill itself that it's again starting from the very start. So now we are actually helping as an organization together with SAI and other ecosystem players to be the driver to understand the real issues and gather together, connect the dots on who are the ones that are really going to drive the bill. And we must say that it's hard to get them on board, but once you actually get them on board and speak the same language, it's really getting very fast. The problem is making a dialogue and have the both sides understand what you're talking about. So the same goes, for example, on there was an association for e-commerce. We have a lot of companies opening in this sector, but very little was done to make it easier for export. And once they accumulated a membership of more than 50, 60 companies that are working in this sector, that are speaking very highly on how they can grow their business with the help of this one and really point out which are the values from that policy. The government cannot just say, I don't want to support this, because they will look bad. So that type of policy making of including the ones that are very active and asking them to contribute is always making them feel kind of pressure to understand and make it happen. The same goes with startups, the same goes with innovation. So I just believe as a message to all the participants here, get the strength in numbers, get together around a certain topic that everybody are willing to contribute, and that very topic is something that everybody agrees on, and try to simplify it to the language that the other side is going to understand, because let's be real, when you start talking about venture capital, talk about fundraising and all these buzzwords, you're on the other side, they're like just stepping back. So you have to speak the same language and try step by step to get to the policy.
Great lessons here from both. And when the government does do the right thing, let them look good, right?
Yeah.
Let them look good, take the credit. Mr. Manai, how can this work?
Thank you. Well, the government of Bahrain have taken the following initiatives to address the concerns of entrepreneurs. Those initiatives and others were recommended by MBA. I'm pleased to list some of the important legislation and procedures have passed in 2017-2018 or in the pipeline to smooth the operation for the entrepreneurs. Here are some legislations and procedures. Law number 31 of 2018, Competition, Promotion and Protection, was passed by the Legislative Authority, Shura Council and Parliament. Competition, Promotion and Protection Authority will be established. The importance of this legislation is that it promotes competition and prevent monopoly, which will have a positive impact on the economy. The second, the draft law on protection and promotion of investment is before the Parliament, and glad to share with you that I drafted this draft law. The third, restructuring and insolvency law, number 22 of 2018. It is providing protection for the financially challenged enterprises which need restructuring for their continued success. I'm also pleased that I shared with other government bodies studying and discussing the draft law. In fact, in cooperation with CLDP, Commercial Law Development Program of USA, we thank them for their cooperation. The law has a wide impact on the national economy. It is worthwhile to mention that in Bahrain, there is a Gramco Gulf Rolling Aluminium Company located in Bahrain, benefited from the legislation and filed a petition under the law. The fourth, realization of commercial registration fees structures. It is clear examples of the level of cooperation and understanding between the private sector and the government. The fees reduced reasonably recently. The record shows that a new commercial registration of 3,000 that make the commercial registration in 2018 82,000 members. The fifth, efficiency in issuing building permit systems is another major achievement whereby building permits can be obtained in planned areas in 5 days. The investment activities in construction and real estate are benefited by this act. Sixth, the Export Promotion Center was set up recently, but it is necessary to widen its activities to include medium-sized companies under 10 million, presently 3 million. But we understand that soon we'll have the approval for 10 million. Recently, a special program was launched to provide support for 100 emerging Arab startups during the World Economic Forum on the Middle East and North Africa held in Jordan. 8 foreign companies may establish branches in Bahrain without the need for the local partner. If the activities that will be undertaken are open to foreign ownership, the government include 94 activities in this list. Thank you.
I noticed that you started with the competition law. We heard the point this morning about how the big crush the small, incumbent advantage. Well, the competition law has something to do with the basis for getting a fair chance at innovating. And all of these reforms, very significant reforms, were in a space where the private sector, entrepreneurs, and government could agree and see eye to eye.
Thank you. Yes, anti-monopoly laws are important. So something we do well at the SBA is we actually have two kind of wings, major divisions in the SBA. One is the small business development. That's where I work, in the Office of International Trade. And our job is to go out, counsel, train, provide financial support and others to small businesses so they can grow, become a business. But the second major function of the Small Business Administration is the Office of Advocacy, which is set up to review. It's filled with attorneys and economists. For good reason, though. It's set up to review any new regulation and then report on the impact they will have on small businesses. Because, as we mentioned earlier, some regulations, no matter how well-meaning, universally applied, will have an outsized impact, an unequal impact on small businesses. So we have an entire staff set up that. They do that by, anytime there's new regulation, they'll travel out throughout the country, they'll have meetings in different states, different regions, and invite small businesses to weigh in. And it's not only on the domestic regulation side, they also do that for any free trade negotiations we're entering into. So before the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada, the recent agreement, the Office of Advocacy traveled to various regions in the United States, had roundtables with small businesses, and then sought feedback and produced a report on the impact and major concerns of the small businesses. The reason that's helpful is because then us, as representatives of SBA and trade negotiations, take that information into those and negotiate beneficial provisions across all the chapters. And we're not the only ones to do this. Recently, I think maybe the end of 2018, Brazil passed a new decree on transparency, basically a notice and comment period of up to 60 days that new regulations that will impact small businesses and other businesses allow the public to weigh in. So the regulatory process, Administrative Procedures Act of the United States, which is similar, is very important to seek that kind of feedback. Whenever we at the SBA, to give you a current example, are working to update our financial guarantee programs. We work with private sector lenders to guarantee loans to mitigate risk so that they can do more lending to either small businesses domestically where they want to export. We will put those regulations, before we even plan to pass them, up on notice and comment and seek feedback from the lending community to see what is actually commercially viable, to make sure that our practices mirror theirs, because they're our lending partners, they're our private sector partners in this. So again, the more feedback, more processes we as policymakers can put in place to get feedback from small businesses and from entrepreneurs is really how we can improve these laws and make sure their voices are heard. We don't always get it right, even with that process, things happen, outsized impact, but again, as long as we're seeking that type of input, and as long as entrepreneurs are feeding into that, right? It's two-way. If I send out a notice and ask for a comment, no one gives me anything, there's not much I can do with it. So it's really important to get involved, try and set up these processes to make sure it's at least gives you the opportunity to weigh in, and then hopefully you can change the minds of the policy leaders as they write the law.
I hope you've been listening, and in addition to the great points about influence and voice, I'm hearing a need for two kinds of process. Did you catch that? Two kinds of process? So one is a process for dialogue. You know, I speak in terms of structured dialogue, but I think I'm going to start using Christian's phrase of intentional conversations. And then the other kind of process is a process for regulatory review, especially anything that affects small business and entrepreneurs. All right.
here is your chance. You have very accomplished policy professionals and entrepreneurs here. Questions about policy?
Thank you for the presentation, discussion. One question that I'd like to have is basically for Sessi or Shura Canada. What are the support that you give as you have the signing from the FDA and the government of Bahrain? What are the support that you have for the SMEs, the young SMEs, the young entrepreneurs in Bahrain, and how can we export to the US and how can we open up to both markets? Because there's always a difficulty now in accessing to the market for us as SMEs.
Thank you for the questions. Actually, the MP have concentrated on the SME entrepreneurs, and there are a lot of improvement have done over the years past. To give you a few examples, these are the government have taken the initiative to allow up to 20% of their services and purchases should pass to SME. This was not done before. There will be a lot of activities in the pipeline that is coming, and soon will be announced about it. It's under discussion, and I think the SME in this year is in good hand. And we look forward to improve the situation of SME, especially when we introduce the value-added tax. Now, if you look at the value-added tax, it's only 5% on consumable, non-commodity items and services. But because of SME, we have excluded medical, health, financial services, housing, and education. And by the way, for the expatriate guests here, we do not have corporate or income tax. Thank you.
Yeah, so that is a good question. It's a large part of why I wanted to take this trip. I think it's a knowledge gap. It's a mind share issue, especially for a country as big as the United States. I call it marketing our markets. So what my office tries to do to capitalize on things like a free trade agreement is we use our domestic footprint, so district offices and field staff throughout the United States, and we try and take to them, and we're going to be doing this more, but identify for them markets that are open to them already. There's a long process for trying to remove additional barriers, regulatory reform in other countries that might be a good fit for U.S. small businesses eventually, and we work on those things, whether it's in a free trade agreement led by the U.S. Trade Representative, or just SME ecosystem issues which we can lead at SBA, our friends at the Department of Commerce. But in general, it's identifying opportunities. Small businesses don't know how to find these kind of things, or at least we have found that. They're, especially in a state of a good economy, they're happy staying right where they are, selling in the United States. So part of this is coming over here and speaking with Bahraini officials and others that I've met here, and being able to go and take that information to our small businesses and matchmaking, and then hopefully turning it over to where I can introduce U.S. small businesses or any small businesses and let them do the rest. I mean, again, innovation, they'll find a way. We have services to help them, like I mentioned earlier, some of our financial products and training, but it's really about just finding a way to provide that information to small businesses and then connecting them with their counterparts to realize these are folks that want to do business. We don't talk about it in exporting anymore. We try and say, where's your global customers? Sell global. Everybody understands customers. That's how their money comes in. So that's what we're trying to push. It's really about finding global customers.
Question, would this, the assistance come from, or the guidance will come from both the chamber, like the American Chamber or the Bahrain Chamber of Commerce, with the cooperation of the Trade and Commerce government? How will that cooperation?
Yeah, so the question was, how does cooperation between the private sector, like the U.S. Chamber, and then a government official?
Let's say I'm not want to go and put my startup business or my small business in the U.S., in New York. So who would be my main channel of contact from Bahrain going all the way to the
Yeah, so We absolutely partner with this. So I'll just tell you something that we're already in the nascent stages of planning following this group. Before I left, I met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and their officials that cover the Gulf, and said, when I get back, I want to set up an event with y'all, with the private sector. We can invite any business, whether it's a business delegation or government officials, whoever, and go to a sector that makes sense because there's a market here for it and goods in the United States, and put on an event and then showcase that information so that we show that it's a real opportunity. So absolutely, we, at least on the U.S. side, we partner and we continue to partner with some of our major trade associations like those that were discussed earlier in our country, and with government officials, and with our partners, with private sector, in whatever market we're trying to work.
Promoting it through a roadshow or...
Absolutely, roadshows, reverse trade missions, all that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the valuable information. I have a question related to maybe patent or the copyright laws at the beginning, at the early stage. A lot of people, they have an idea, they publish, and then the idea is somehow gone either by bigger corporations or more powerful people. Specifically, like here in Bahrain, you have a high competition. So, is there any kind of basic law or basic application where you can save and protect your intellectual property right from the beginning in order to preserve this idea? Because you might spread out even to US or other parts of the world in order to get investors or whatever. In order to, but have your idea protected at the early beginning. Of course, it should not be too much expensive because as a startup, you are run behind financial support. So, but you need your idea, your intellectual properties to protect it.
Okay, IP in Bahrain, and maybe there's a IP issue elsewhere.
I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, in Bahrain, which I couldn't finish because already 5 minutes passed, we have the data protection, which was published in July 2018 and will come into effect in August 2019. So we have that into account to protect. And not only to protect you, also we have an organization, we call it Tamkeen, that to put you on the right tracks. Thank you.
Depends on what sector you're working in. For sure, by the moment you're starting, and because I'm working in technology and ICT, the moment you're coding something, you're having your protection and your IP created. But whenever you would like to have a product, physical product, then it's another issue. I think that when creating a company around a product, you have to focus on what's the added value if you would like to go outside. So if just by the idea the idea is more unique than your company and yourself, then basically somebody else can do it without you. So you have to position that in the mix, your business idea, your team brings something on the table that creates a brand that will be acknowledged, and you can go it from there. With help with a lot of institutions, I don't know much about Bahrain. I can speak how it is in Macedonia. You can have your IP protected, depending which industry, but it's very little protection because basically it's just saving. You're not saving a lot of time. You're actually wasting time for the protection. You should be thinking about building the business. So the business side will sell you first on market is always the best.
But see, when the idea is great, a million people will just take the idea and run away with it. You know?
As an investor,
IT is a different topic. I understand this one. There's even knowledge behind it, but sometimes you put a seed, and there will be thousands of people just coming to water and then foster your or harvest your plant.
True. If the seed is great, then it's about how you're growing the plant. So that experience about growing it is actually much more important than the seed itself.
Yeah, but what if I cannot harvest it as an initial waterer? Problem.
Okay, I think in this kind of talks in Paraguay, we always say is that the value of the idea is nothing if you don't have the ability to do that, to make it happen. So yeah, you can protect your idea and it's part of the process, but as you said earlier, you have to be able to make it happen. So you have to spend more time developing the idea and doing it. So yeah, I mean, even in our meetings, we always say that the idea doesn't have any value for itself. It's just the ability and the capacity that you have. So yeah, I think I agree with you on that. That you have to be more focused on gaining ability and viability to do that. So yeah.
Again, where is my protection? Even if I have capable to do it, I need to
So
protect
we have a hot topic
process.
here, and I think we'll probably take one more question after this if you want to
get back on the topic.
I mean, just briefly, the United States has a huge network and web of laws that protects all different kinds of intellectual property, so patents, trademarks, copyrights, depends what it is. And so it's very complicated. It is easy, it is time consuming, but at least in our market and other friendly markets where we work back and forth, you have protections and you have the ability through your court system to enforce the laws and make sure that your intellectual property, at least for a time period. A trademark is forever, but patent and copyright's time out. I'm by no means an IP attorney, but those are huge topics, and especially for small businesses. One of our greatest comments back during the USMCA comment period for small businesses was improving the IP protections with Canada and Mexico. These are developed markets, we've had long-term partnerships, but there's still intellectual property theft. And if I'm not able to, in the United States, monetize my product, it's nothing at that point. So, and I need to be able to do that through enforcement. So it's really about enforcement. If anybody's watching, a lot of our trade negotiations and a lot of what we're doing with China and others, it's specifically targeted in on being able to protect our intellectual property so that we don't lose all the value after all the hard work goes into building it up.
Final question, sir.
Has to be a good one. So there are many stakeholders in entrepreneurial and economic growth. I was wondering if you view civil societies as a contributor towards that goal. What are your thoughts on that? Or can civil societies contribute towards entrepreneurship and finding solutions to real-world problems?
You know, right before this panel, Christian confessed to me that he has a civil society background. Anybody else want to answer on civil society? Why don't you go first?
I'm happy to just briefly, so I'll give you a good example. And it's not really domestic, but it's a great idea that we're trying to replicate. So I worked, before I took this job, I worked for Nikki Haley at the United States United Nations. And so we often see issues such as in Syria and other places where humanitarian aid goes in, and whether through government or other groups, a lot of the aid is stolen. And so we've been working, at the time we're working with civil society who's on the ground often on how we can capture exactly what's going on, because then there's disputes in the international forum on who did it and why they do it and who's to be held accountable. So one of the ideas that came up was literally just taking live stream GoPros and slapping them on top of the aid trucks, and we'll know right away whoever's pulling them over. And it's in real time. And you can protect that information through blockchain, so it can be captured. But that's a small business that could be a huge business and also feed into the kind of civil society process to address a real need, such as the humanitarian crisis. So it's not necessarily like a smart startup with big tech, but it's how technology can be used working with civil society to accomplish a common goal. So in that case, delivery of humanitarian aid. So that's how we have worked with civil society.
In our case, we live ourselves as a bridge between the private sector and the public sector, because we are, the association is a civic association. We are in the middle, and we can bring interesting people from the private sector and sit them together with the public sector, and I think that's a really key role in our ecosystem. That's the case. That's our case. We've been working towards the governance designing of the ecosystem in Paraguay for the last 2 years, and the result was great because we are not only interested in private sector interests, but also with a wider view of the stakeholders of the ecosystem. And I think that's the main the main contribution that a civil society can make in this process of strengthening the ecosystem. So yeah, I think we are fundamental stakeholder in the ecosystem, and we have to be responsible and hold accountable for that as well. So yes, I think that's one of our main goals.
Great question.
Well, I will wish you all success in your intentional conversations on policy for good ecosystems. And please all help me out here. I can't clap. Please clap for a great panel.